right. Good morning. Can we get a thumbs up or a head shake or a hallelujah if you can see me and hear me? Something? Waves. Thank you. Well, good morning. Welcome to HR's evaluation training. We wanted to go ahead and do a couple of introductions, a couple of housekeeping items while we have you. First of all, thank you all for being here today. It is January 26th, 10 a.m. Weatherman says it's cloudy with the chance of maybe snow. But I have been known to be wrong before. So I want to introduce myself. My name is Abel Johnson. I work here on the growth team within the Human Resources Department, here to help serve you and all your growth needs. And so I'm glad to be here today to help facilitate the training. Co-facilitating with me is Kyle Galloway. He's one of our newer members of our growth team. We're really glad to have him, blessed to have him here with the HR team. He'll be introducing himself here in a minute. You also have a couple other great HR team members here with us, our fearless leader, Tiffany Trader, and then also our amazing Tiffany Whitman, who will also be here to help answer any questions for you. So you have almost the whole HR team from the growth team here today. A couple other things. This session is going to be recorded, not necessarily for quality assurance, but just so that we can go ahead and capture the thoughts, questions, discussions that we have today. And then we will go ahead and send out an email recap after this session with this training and being recorded for those that couldn't make the training today, or for those that you just want to go back and re-listen to some of the things that were said before you do your own evaluation. So with that being said, we're only going to take an hour of your time today, so we'll go ahead and zip right into it. The annual performance evaluation, as we know, by definition, typically involves things such as talking about your employees' accomplishments, meeting, have they met their goals for the year, and, where's the room for improvement. This year, however, as you can tell from our title slide deck, we're focusing on a different word, and some of the other synonyms for that word that are going to come out when you think of evaluation this year is going to be flexibility, compassion, kindness. Your primary goal as a leader should be to help your employees perform their jobs to the best of their ability, as well as helping develop them professionally and personally. As we all know, as leaders and managers, this requires a lot of commitment and time and investment of energy on our part. But as we know, our employees are very well worth it, and what we put into it is what we get out of it. That being said, we have some great content for you today. We're excited to share this. This is Kyle and I, as we call it. I want to start calling it our world tour. Of course, it's just the university tour, but this is now our 9th training session. You are 9th in line, and Thursday will be our last training session, and we will be done with these trainings. So we are excited to be here and be with you. Apologize to my teammates for all of their having to re-listen to our content 9 times in a row, but we'll get through this together. Kyle, go ahead and kick us off. Tell us a little bit about what the topics we'll be discussing today, and then we'll go from there.
Well, Abel, good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad that you are all with us this morning. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kyle Galloway. Been with BSU for now going on 4 months. So excited to be here and looking forward to today's training with you all. So today's topics, we're going to discuss understanding 2020 and the challenges this year has brought us. I think it's easy to say that 2020 has definitely been different and difficult for a lot of us. And we're going to discuss a piece of the pie regarding, why it was a little bit different. We're going to also discuss showing empathy and what that means, but more importantly, how do we discuss it as we have our evaluations? We're going to discuss having the conversation, what does a tone sound like this year, and how to tie empathy into the conversation. And we'll also discuss some things to be mindful of. Most of these are HR related topics, loss, leaves, those type of inquiries. And then of course, we'll leave time for questions at the end. Feel free to unmic or submit anything in the chat box if you have a question. And we're looking for a good session this morning, and please feel free to join. So for that, Abel, I'll kick it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kyle. We forgot to mention, we're going to have some fun today too. So, that's on the agenda, but it always is when you're working with HR. So, this slide depicts a lot of words, as you can tell, descriptive words. So we want to break the ice here by asking a question. And again, please throw it in the chat box, You can unmute and say it, and we'd love to have discussion along the way, whatever you feel comfortable with. In one word, how would you describe managing your own team during this COVID-19 work remote world that we find ourselves in? And go ahead and throw it in there on mic, whatever you want to do. We'd love to hear some of your comments and thoughts. Lisa, yeah, exhausting for sure. Flexible. I'm just reading them. They're popping on my phone. Creative, challenging, a privilege. That's the first word. 9 sessions I've seen. That's a different word. Intentional, isolated. That's true. You can be innovative. I've heard that a lot this year. So keep popping them in there. I love this activity because one of the things that I have found in my short life, but in many experiences, is during hard times in life or tragedies, whether that's a tsunami or Katrina or 9/11 or whatever it may be, when we go through things, it seems it's always hard and difficult at first. But what we find is there's some blessings and some great things that come out of hard things. And some of your words are describing just that. You may have found during this process that you have learned to stretch and grow your own managerial and leadership skills. You may have found that there's got to be a different way to connect with your employees that you've never had to do before. And you've had to learn to adapt and to be transformative. Maybe it's been challenging, but it's also been amazing. And so not only has this year been difficult for all of us, and I'm sure our employees, but as leaders, it's an opportunity for us to grow. And if we aren't anything, at Boise State, we are definitely known for innovation and creativity. And so I love your words, and I appreciate the activity and your thoughts behind those words. And so I'm sure all of us have had a different perspective. So how did we get to 2020, right? I'm sure we are all grateful. We're about almost a month into 2021, and we've said goodbye to 2020. But let's understand a little bit about 2020 and what it's brought to us, why the challenges, as we all know, with the pandemic, but how do those affect our evaluation and how we will conduct them this year as we think back on our employees and their output. And so for that, I'll kick it back to Kyle.
Thanks, Abel. There's no question that 2020 has been an unprecedented year for us all. As a university, we've had drastic changes with quickly transitioning some jobs and or services to a virtual setting. We've adapted the work environment to provide social distancing for roles that can't be performed virtually. We are supporting our employees through unexpected challenges that they're facing at home, such as virtual school for their kids, COVID-19 related concerns or diagnosis, among many more things. Currently over 80 million people worldwide have been affected with COVID-19. So when you think about what's been challenging for you as a leader, those same challenges and or concerns are also being faced by your employees or staff members. Our lives have changed along with our work. Social gatherings have been limited, and I'll explain a little bit later on how this can affect someone's work. So there are a couple of things to think about, prior to your evaluation conversation with your employees. First, does your employee know what's expected of them? Have you set those clear expectations with your employee post-COVID? With employees working in a remote setting or some kind of modified schedule, it can be difficult to have those metrics on an employee or staff member if you never had those conversations. So like I said earlier, some of our employees have never left as they are essential to the business. But is it possible that they are facing similar challenges as those that are working in a remote setting? Maybe walk-in traffic is different. Maybe cleaning patterns are changing. So, the answer is yes. We've all been affected one way or another. So because this year has been so different, we truly believe that empathy should play a part in the evaluation process this year. And for that, I'm going to kick it back over to Abel for the meat of our discussion regarding empathy and really what that means from this last 12 months. So Abel, kick it back over to you, sir.
Yeah, so we know that, typically in a traditional performance evaluation or performance appraisal, if you've worked in private sector, different areas, all the same thing, we know by definition that it's a time to evaluate your employees, right? And a lot of our focus typically in these once a year meetings are focused on just that, right? We have to assign a score. We have to talk about what the work they've done. And it's so much about the output of the person. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's just how it's traditionally been done. But it's weird that we're throwing a different curveball this year, right? Showing empathy, and how does that play into evaluations? Well, first of all, we know that empathy, if we define it according to Webster, it's just understanding another person's feelings. However, I want to dig a little deeper and pull back the layers a little bit on this. And I like to always refer to my main guy, Simon Sinek, one of the greats of our generation. I would, in my opinion, he has a great TED Talk on empathy. And we'll throw it in the chat box and we'll put it in the email recap if you want to watch the whole video. It's a great one. But he says a sentence in there that's very, very powerful. And I want to use this as my definition, as our definition for empathy in this training. He says, empathy is being concerned about the human being and not just their output. So if you think about that for a second, right, the evaluation is focused on the output. And we all are here, we all are being paid to do a job or to do a duty, which is very important, and it contributes to our mission of our departments, our teams, the university, students, staff, faculty. However, I think COVID-19 has taught us that people are being affected on multiple levels, right? Life has changed a little bit. Our working life has changed a little bit. And so much of that can affect the person, right? The person as a whole, the holistic person. And we should be more concerned about the person, our employees, and not just the output, because in all reality, that person and those things that are affecting that person can also affect their output, their ability to do the job or do a job well. So leadership is about empathy. It's about having the ability to relate to and connect with people for the purpose of inspiring and empowering their lives. And that's a big definition, right? So there's a lot there. Empathy should be our theme for 2020 when it comes to evaluations. The great thing is as leaders and supervisors, you're in a great position to understand your employees' needs, their fears, their wants, their struggles. And as Kyle mentioned, this has been a rough year. So our tone and our approach should be one of compassion and kindness, using language that truly shows that you understand, that maybe a project didn't get done on time, or why it was delayed, or why it didn't get finished or polished as much as it should have been. Again, has some of that to do with COVID-19, has some of that to do with their working situation at home. So we'll talk a little bit about some of these layers and some of these perspectives, goggles we want you to see through this, that may or may not have affected their output. Now, I want to stop for a second and again, quality assurance, this is being recorded, so for the whole world, right, for all of us to know and look back on. Empathy, what we're saying in HR is empathy is not giving a hall pass for our employees, giving them a 3, whatever, and saying, hey, we did good. We're not saying that. We're not saying empathy is a get out of jail card. What we're saying is we want to be mindful of the struggles that they may have faced, or all of us have faced during the pandemic, which may have affected their output. So how do we do that, right? So this is a question that we think about. It's like, how do I measure? How do I do this? And the best answer is tied back to the question that Kyle asked. Have you checked in with your employees since post COVID-19? And do you check in with them on a regular basis? Do you understand the struggles that your employees have faced? Do your employees have the support and tools to perform their job well and to feel that they can do their job? So these are all questions as leaders we should be asking ourselves and thinking of. And again, it takes time and it takes commitment to check in with those employees, and to find that out, but it's definitely worth it, and it will help their output and the mission towards your department and your college. So now you may be thinking, okay, great, HR, this is great information, blah, blah, blah. How do I actually put this into practice? How do I have the conversation using empathy, what you're saying, and put that into practice and actually do it? And for that, we have some tips we're going to share with you. And for that, I'll kick it back over to Kyle, and he'll be able to introduce that topic a little bit.
Thanks, Abel. So the video, 7 tips for conducting the better performance review conversation, really is a great video that shows you how to have the right conversation with your employees. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to play the video. It's about 3 minutes long, and we'll recap here in just a brief moment.
Conducting the performance review conversation can be challenging, both for you as a leader as well as for the employee. The employee may be concerned that they're going to be sitting in the hot seat and get judged. They might also worry about how the performance appraisal could affect the potential for them to get a raise. You might be concerned that your feedback can cause them to get emotional or defensive or even argumentative. That's why it's really helpful to have a plan in place when going into this conversation. So I'm going to share with you 7 tips to confidently have the performance review conversation. Tip number 1, don't ad lib. Use the forms that have been provided by your company for the performance review conversation. Number 2, make sure your employee gets to prepare the exact same forms so that you can be on the same page and there's no surprises for them. You don't want them to be frustrated when suddenly they feel like they're being judged for something that they just weren't expecting. Number 3, don't just dive in and get to business. Build some rapport. Set the tone by asking them how their week went. Thank them for showing up to the meeting and maybe discuss something like how their family is doing or any vacation plans they might have. Number 4, before you give your feedback, first allow them in each category to tell you how they felt their performance was in the past year. Tell them where you agreed with their performance opinions, and then tell them where you may have differed. This is an important phrase. Instead of saying disagree or allowing room for any kind of argument, just say, I appreciate your feedback on that. I would agree you did a great job with X, Y, and Z. Where my opinion differs a bit is, and then give the example. Number 6, when giving feedback, make sure you'll use only observable facts, not assumptive judgments. You don't want to say something like, Mike, it really seems like you've checked out and you don't even care anymore this past quarter. Instead, say something like, I've noticed you've been tardy 3 times out of the last 4 weeks. And in most of the meetings in the last 2 weeks, you've really only participated once. What can you tell me about this? This gives them an opportunity to share their side and really explain what might be going on with them. Which leads us to number 7. They may become defensive or argumentative. If so, as challenging as it may be, allow them the time to vent and listen to what they have to say. No need to prescribe an answer, just listen, and if necessary, ask them to share a little bit more.
Yeah, what a great video. You know, we truly believe that this video does a great job at explaining the importance of your tone, you know, while going over the evaluations. And again, some things to remember are, you know, the most important piece of the pie is ensuring that you have a plan in place. You know, we're not ad-libbing. We're coming prepared, and, you know, that takes a little bit of time sometimes. We're building rapport during the conversation to make the conversation a little bit more comfortable, right? We're also giving time to our employees and asking them to share how well they felt they did this year. And again, in HR, you know, the most important thing is only using facts. When it comes to performance management, you know, the first thing we ask typically in HR is, you know, where's the documentation? So when we are doing our evaluations with our employees, you know, we're only going over those facts that can be measurable. And at the end, we're giving time to have maybe the employee vent. If it's something that they felt they could have worked on a little bit better or some things that they did well on, let them talk. And at that time, it's just, you know, our job as a leader just to listen and then maybe come back with the plan the next time you guys have your one-on-one. So again, you know, here are some other examples or suggestions you can use prior to your conversation with your employee. You know, we like these phrases because they show empathy. Thank you for your contributions during this difficult time. You know, we know this year's been difficult, so let's focus on some things that went well. I understand this year's been challenging, but here are some things that we can work on as we proceed in 2021, or however you want to tailor that approach. But your tone and approach really has the ability to turn any situation into more of a positive outcome. So conversations that start off with empathy gives a perception to the employee or staff member that you do truly care for their well-being. So for that, we're going to touch base on performance management, and I'm going to kick it back over to Abel.
Thanks, Kyle. Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to pause just for a second. Any questions or thoughts so far about anything we've covered? I'd love to hear anything. You guys are awfully quiet. You're one of our biggest groups. I'm really impressed with the output and the turnout for this group session. So it's a blessing to do this remotely in all reality, where finding a space to hold all of you would be very difficult if we were back in the office. So I appreciate that. Yeah, we had a couple questions pop in. Tiffany T, could you maybe read those or see if you can answer some of those?
Absolutely. The first question that came in is, are forms changing this year? And the answer to that is no. The professional and classified employees forms will stay the same this year. And the other one was asking about what number 5 was, and Nicole was nice enough to go ahead and answer that. So I appreciate that. That's in chat as well.
Yeah, awesome. Another thought while we're talking about the other forms, we do have another module training that is, it's an e-learning platform. So you can go into the HR's website. We'll put the link in the chat here for you, but it's just basically a tutorial of how to fill out the form and the different slots and where they need to go. And it's just a take it at your own pace kind of training. It's recorded and done by our good friend, Jackie Thorngard. So she made that video for us. So please feel free to use that video if you need more information on how to fill out the form. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, jokes? I want to do a shout out while we are pausing for Dalton and Judy for making this possible. We worked with them to schedule this, and so thank you for scheduling your team and getting them here. I appreciate the help there. All right, so more tips and things to be aware of when we talk about performance management. The performance evaluation is one tool to help be successful in your performance management of your team. There's all these other great things in this illustration that show other ways that you can be successful, right? Discussing positive components, giving feedback, obviously setting goals, meeting regularly, right? That's that. We keep kind of hounding that, but meeting with your employees regularly so that you can get a gauge and a pulse as to how they're doing. Again, not just what work are you doing? What are you working on? Is that project going to be done on time? Not just that component, but how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are any barriers? Anything I can do to remove these barriers to help you be better at work? What do you enjoy about your job? What are some things that maybe we can work on? So all of these things, I joke every time we do this session about relating the performance evaluation appraisal that happens once a year, the big conversation. It's similar to Christmas with my children. Dalton would probably understand. We talk about our kids sometimes in our chats. Christmas is kind of a bad performance evaluation, right? So my kids never know if they're going to get presents or not until the morning of, right? They don't know which list they've been on all year long until they wake up and they're like, oh, I must have done something right. We don't want that to happen in our performance evaluation management with our employees. An employee should never know or be confused as to where they stand with you or with the team until the February, March to have that discussion. And so good performance management is about constant feedback, constant communication, constant recognition. Again, it's no different with my children, right? So there's times throughout the year that there's teaching moments, there's times where there's corrective moments, and there's times that there's praising moments and recognizing that they did something well. And so I've done a better job, even after creating the content here with Kyle. We were joking, it's like, man, I need to do better with my kids in this Christmas thing. They don't know where they stand. So anyway, I just thought that was relatable, and I wanted to share that story. Any other thoughts on that, Kyle? Did you want to pop in or say anything?
No, that's great. I think I'm going to start giving my kids, monthly check-ins to see how they're doing and report, if they're naughty or nice. So well said.
Yeah. And maybe just checking in, right? Like, how are you doing? How's school? Tell me about some things what are you learning? So I need to do better at that too. Sharing the feedback and soliciting for feedback is great. And again, conversation is key. Now, goals still matter, right? There's all these other ways that we can do performance management. There's an IDP. And again, we'll have this in the recap, in an individual development plan. So for those that want to get into depth and really want to, they're wanting to grow and they're hungry, they're going to come to you and say, what can I do to get here? I want to get this job. I want to be promoted, whatever. It's a defined plan here in HR that we can help define what those goals are and how to follow up with your employee. Not everybody wants to do an IDP plan, right? Not everybody wants to run for a promotion or just something. Maybe their goal is to go back to school. Maybe their goal is to go part-time and take some courses and learn about finance. Whatever that may be, right? We want to make sure that we're growing our employees and we're understanding their needs and wants, making sure they're challenged. That being said, we're going to pause here again. And again, I want to get your participation and votes here. Here's the question. How do you personally within your own team, and maybe the way you're doing it is something we've already said, but if not, we'd love to hear what works for you. How do you measure their performance of your own team during this pandemic? What has been working for you? Are you doing a check-in? Or if so, what's the format look like for you? Do you guys do an icebreaker? Do you is it short? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Do you do team meetings? How are you kind of gauging that right now as leaders in your own sphere? And I'll do a Zoom pause for a few seconds as my colleague Casey and the HR Fireside Chats does. So we're okay with awkward silences in HR. See a couple faces I'm almost tempted to pick on. Tiffany, I just saw something pop up. Weekly check-ins, okay? Regular check-ins. But the first 5, I couldn't read that last one. Tiffany, do you mind reading that? I'm on my phone, by the way, so it's hard to see these chats come in.
So it's weekly check-ins. Oh, they're moving fast. I'm gonna have to scroll back up just a second. Weekly check-ins, but the first 5 to 10 minutes is about what's going on in their lives, kids, etc. We are very open with each other, lean on each other. So yeah, lots of check-ins. This is great stuff that's coming in. Regular one-on-ones, weekly meetings with members of multiple teams, and monthly 4-hour strategy meetings. Wow, this is good stuff.
Well, it sounds like we're preaching to the choir, so I apologize. You think Dalton as well. What are some of the content? I'm kind of curious. In those check-ins, is there something specific that you're doing that seems to be working well, that makes your employees feel engaged and have that psychological safety and feel like they belong and they're excited?
So you've got some here saying telling jokes. One.
Love that.
How they can better support them. This is good stuff.
All great stuff. Daily brief check-ins. Thank you all. I really appreciate that. We talk about food, love it. It's so great. I'll tell a quick story. I'm going off script here, Kyle. So he'll have to slap me upside the head here in a minute. Some of the greatest leaders, and I like to use the word leaders rather than managers and supervisors, because there is a difference between a manager and a leader. But as we all progress to a leadership, to be a great leader to those around us and to take care of those, some of the greatest leaders in my own life have indeed been former supervisors or managers. And I think your chats are reaffirming this. They were always people who I could trust and confide in. And we would talk about almost more non-related work things like food or family. And over time, we had this trust and this transparency where I could go to them and they could give me real feedback, and I wouldn't take it personally, and I know that they cared about me as a person. And so as you continue to do that, you're building that trust and that transparency and that psychological safety for that employee to come to you when there is a real problem, when they need real help. And so you guys are already doing a great job at this. So I praise you and thank you for that. One of the last things I want to mention before we move on to this slide, to the next slide, make sure this year that you're giving credibility and you're giving credit for adaptability for your employees. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, because we've moved from working at work to working remotely for most of us. We did a couple sessions with Campus Ops and they haven't moved at all. But for most of us, we've made that transition, and our employees, for the most part, have made that transition, whether that was forced or not, or happy or not, but they've done it, right? And so are we giving credit for adaptability for people who have jumped onto the ship and they're holding on as tight as they can and the waves are coming and they're still there, right? They're still with us. Their attitude is great. They're still a team player. So make sure that we're thinking about that part of the credibility and giving people credit for that agile flexibility of changing direction and pivoting so easily. Because I think a lot of times we miss that, and that is a big part of their performance and just how well they've stuck the landing. Anyway, so I'll let Kyle, did you want to say anything else? Did I miss anything on that?
That was great. No, I think you hit everything on the head, Abel.
Awesome. Well, we're going to move into the next slide. This is probably my favorite slide. I've said this many times to my team. It's probably my favorite slide and probably my most inappropriate HR slide. But it's relevant, and we'll explain why that 5-second video or 15-second video is in there. So I'll let Kyle play that, and we'll wrap back up and we'll stick the landing on this one.
Look at the cute dog.
Okay. I saw some heads poke up and your ears started getting red when you heard I said this was the most inappropriate HR slide. You're like, what? I want to see this. I saw Dalton's face. I saw Jeremy. He started looking, and so yeah. Why is this in here, right? AmeriQuest does these great videos. They're older '90s commercials. They're funny though, and their slogan is "Don't judge too quickly. We won't." And I thought of this, and I thought this would be appropriate fit because it ties in to the theme of empathy, right? And how does this tie in? From the person in the park, and maybe that's us, maybe that's our employee, from one perspective, they don't feel like anything is wrong. They don't feel like they're doing anything wrong, right? They're just enjoying a brownie or whatever it may be. And from a different perspective, whether that's as a manager or a colleague or another member of the team, it may seem perception's reality sometimes, but sometimes it's just not reality. So judging too quickly and jumping into an assumption about the output of another employee, their camera's off, they're not responding, they must be taking a nap, they're a slacker. All these things may easily jump into our head, but we want to make sure, and hopefully the video is conveying this, that we don't want to judge too quickly. We don't know what's going on in people's lives, especially working from home, as their life is at home and their children is at home, and they're probably wearing many hats. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. So I think that's just a great segue. Kyle, do you want to jump into these lenses that we need to be careful of and we need to see through, that we've never probably found ourselves in before up until now, but some different perspectives as we think about performance management in our employees?
Absolutely. You know, the fun stuff in HR, the approved leaves, you know, these are always a hot topic, but this year we're using the word harmless. You know, anything that is out of an employee's control should not be used against them during the evaluation period. So what does that mean? We all know about FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, or ADA leave, or we have furloughs for some of us that were on campus this year. But we've had a new law that started in April of last year called the Families First Coronavirus Act. And these particular leaves allowed your employees to have a block of time off. And what does that mean? Whether they're off of work for 2 weeks or, 60 days, that time they were away from the office is not going to be used against them on the evaluation period. So I want to make sure you guys understand that as leaders, because these are particular laws that you guys, if you haven't had interaction with them yet, you will have somebody eventually on one of these approved leaves. So we want to make sure we give you guys the tools and knowledge regarding that. We've also had situations this year where we've had schools and daycare closures. And what does that look like for your employee? We've had people that had to leave meetings to go pick up a child because of a COVID outbreak at their child's daycare. That's something that's out of their control, and it's immediate and it needed to be done. So we have to think about things that are really out of our employees' control when we sit down and evaluate the whole package this year. For me, coming from Ada County a few months ago, using Zoom was new for me. It took me about 2 weeks to understand how to log in and start a meeting. Half the time during my 12 o'clock meetings with Tiffany, I'm eating a sandwich because I'm also cooking, becoming the lunchman for my children's school because they were doing online curriculum this past semester. So there's a lot of things that are playing a part in the perception. And my video may be off, but I'm there in reality and I'm making sure that I'm still focused. Another thing too, we've had people like myself that have had unreliable internet connection. Today, I'm using a hotspot on my cell phone because I want to ensure that this training is successful. I don't want to have anybody drop off because of my internet connection. And again, why is that important? I have my wife working from home. my 3 kids were doing their online schooling. So it really boggled down our internet. So these are real life scenarios that are going on with people campus wide. So just think about the struggles that some of us are going through. And, for that's why we want you to be mindful of things that are really sometimes out of our control. For that, Abel, I'm going to kick it back over to you to touch back on the iceberg effect. I think you kind of touched on it briefly.
Yeah.
And, I think that's important. The layers and really understanding, the perception that is, may not be there in the eyes of the leader.
Yeah, I definitely think it's true. And I know I have my own stories, and I'll share a few here in a minute. Before we do, let's take a quick pause. Does any of this resonate for anybody? Does any of this feel familiar as far as, working from home and these different scenarios, internet breaking out? Maybe your kids are playing Xbox in the background and you're on a meeting and they boot you off and the Netflix is on in the other room. And, I'd love to hear your own thoughts. I'd love to hear your own stories and share your own perspective and just take a minute to see if, how this relates to you and if what we're saying seems to be true for you, at least in your perspective. Maybe I'll pick on, I know nobody likes to go first, so maybe I'll pick on Dalton to lead us out.
Sure. Yeah. Of course. We've all been in those meetings where, I don't know, like a cat likes to jump on your lap during a meeting. And so it's happened to all of us. I think every single person that I've been in a meeting with at least once, routinely has had internet issues. The kids, Kyle, I identified with that. My internet is usually pretty stable, but when, I have both kids home and then also wife's at work, it's like, what is going on? Oh no. And you never know, or you have a cat yelling in the background, like it's happening. So heck yeah, happens.
Yeah. No, I definitely appreciate that. Thanks, Dalton, for letting me pick on you. Nicole, cats. Yeah. I'm sure there's going to be a channel. I'm sure there's a YouTube channel about cat memes and working from home because they just like to climb up and sit on your keyboard and things like that. I don't have a cat, but I have a 3-year-old boy and he likes to do the same thing. So it's funny that we talk about this, and I'd love to. Corianne, did you have somebody else on mic?
I was just gonna say a puppy. We got a puppy, and usually she's awesome. She sleeps, she's great, but the second she wakes up, I gotta take her out. Puppies, very small little bladders, and if I wait, then there's an accident on the carpet. So it's like gotta run. I'll be right back. So I don't have the internet. I don't have the kids at home anymore. But the puppy has replaced that same thing of I don't even have time to say I'll be right back. It's if I don't go now, we got to pee on the carpet to deal with.
Yeah. So. A lot of our tolerance has changed, right? So as I think it's been a blessing in a sense to see more, and this is getting back to the image here about the iceberg effect. We're seeing more of people than we've ever seen before in different layers in light. Before at the office, all we saw was maybe the top layer above the ice, right? Above the water. Maybe we just saw the Kelly of the office, right? I'm picking on Kelly now. I'm just seeing people on my phone. These are the people that are in front of me. So maybe I just saw him and the professional side of him. But now I get to see, what he likes. Obviously, Boise State posters. He loves books. His kids like to run in. He has a dog. He has a lab. So now what we're seeing was there's not a distinction between professional Abel and personal Abel. Whereas if we're at the office, there was none of these distractions there, right? So now we're seeing more people and we're seeing a lot of layers. And what we're saying in HR is these are good things, but we have to be careful where we draw the line of how that affects an evaluation of a person and a number you give them and their output because of things that are not in their control or because of their working environment of where they're at. So again, I've got 3 kids, so I'm always talking in movie quotes. Watching Shrek a few weeks ago, people are like onions. They have layers, right? Just like these layers of this iceberg. So we have the lifestyle now we can see, maybe behavioral. Maybe some of us have seen our colleagues yelling at their kids in the background. I know we all have heard Casey on our HR fireside chats. She's dealing with a lot of kids and they're all on school. That's just the reality of it. And so we get to see more of people. And again, the perception and reality, we need to be careful of that. And again, how we as leaders interpret all of this and have to convert that to an evaluation and a scoring and their output, just keeping those lens on in our process and our thought process and how we get there. So how we get to A and Z, or how we get to the top of the mountain, is as important as getting to the top. Any other thoughts, questions, jokes, anything before we move on to some of the last segments of our training, and then we'll leave it up for some questions. Great. Kyle, do you want to lead us into the next? Do you want to introduce our guest special speaker here?
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Neese, no stranger to the campus community, a true expert on empathy, mental health, mental wellness. And he was a true, a great resource for us during this pandemic here in HR. So we were lucky to have his partnership as we discuss empathy with you all today. And like I always say, HR doesn't always have the answers, nor are we the experts on campus, but we're really good at partnering with those that are good experts and, really understand the why behind the empathy and the mental health and why it's important. So we were lucky enough to have a 3-minute clip from his 6-minute Matt Minute. So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you all right now.
When it comes to applying my knowledge of empathy, there's a really great framework that helps me keep in check. On one end of the spectrum, there's what we call cognitive empathy. This is when I understand cognitively what's going on for another person emotionally, but I don't have my own emotional connection to that experience and therefore don't care enough to do anything about this understanding. On the other end of the spectrum, there's emotional empathy. This is when I'm connecting so much emotionally with my perception of what the other person is feeling that I lose myself in a moment. I become flooded with my own emotions in an attempt to align with the other person that I'm unable to be helpful in that situation. And then in the middle, there's what we call compassionate empathy, which, as you might expect, is a healthy blend between the first two. Based on my working knowledge of this person's life, when I'm feeling compassionate empathy, I have enough information to infer what they are likely experiencing. I have enough emotional connection to this person and their circumstances to have the desire to help. And because I'm staying grounded in my own identity, I'm able to be moved by this experience and the ability to compassionately or empathically support this person.
The full 6-minute clip will be available when we send a recap out to you all here the next couple of days. But, great insight from a true expert regarding our theme today, empathy. And we were definitely excited to partner with him regarding this topic.
When it comes to
as we, move forward, another piece of our empathy theme is, understanding, like we said earlier, the life struggles, especially during the pandemic. According to the CDC, the COVID-19 pandemic has been stressful for a lot of people. Fear and anxiety about a new disease and, what can happen can be overwhelming and cause strong emotions in adults and in children. Public health actions such as social distancing can make people feel isolated. I think we had a leader in our last training session say that she has felt really isolated over these last 9 months because she lives alone and, she's working in a remote setting and, it's gone to her a little bit. So again, this can affect work if it's not treated properly. Stress during an infectious disease outbreak can also cause changes in sleeping or eating behaviors, difficulty sleeping or concentrating. It could worsen chronic health problems. For me personally, my daughter plays competitive soccer. So as she goes to her indoor games, my anxiety kind of increases because A, I'm well aware we're in a pandemic, but B, we're allowing this to happen because they're taking the safety protocols, but it doesn't mean that I'm not still a little stressed out about what could happen when we leave the soccer field, right? Maybe somebody's gonna scratch her or rub her eye the wrong way, and maybe they were coughing before. So again, this is unusual of me to have this type of anxiety, but it's been real, especially during, the pandemic of 2020. So again, many employees or staff members here on campus are facing those same very worries. And during this time, is it appropriate to show a little bit of grace as a leader? And again, we think the answer is yes. As a manager, it's our job to ensure that we have EAP and other tools in place to allow our employees or staff members to succeed in the workplace. And I know, Abel, I think you had a change in your eating behaviors. The kitchen is a little close to you. You were talking about last week, sir?
Yeah. I think I'm going to need some different pant sizes by the time I go back to work. So, it is in all reality though, jokes aside, for me, I live in a home where I wasn't planning on working from home. So I don't have a lot of extra bedrooms and space to have a desk in. So for me, in my master bedroom, we have a desk here. And so the bed is very close to me, right? So I feel like it's harder for me to turn off the switch of work and go to bed than was before, when I could just say, it's 5, goodbye, and I can close the door and walk away. So that there's less of a turn off disconnect from work life and personal life, right? So my working habits, and probably many of you have felt the same, our eating habits, the fridge is very close. So I'm taking opportunities to get up, to go out to the mailbox, check the mail, say hi to the mailman, have a conversation, give him a Mountain Dew, and then come back. So just anything that I can do to kind of get up. But in all reality, some of these changes in our habits of sleep, eating, work life, some of us have seen that some of us are sending emails at midnight, or 10:30, or, so our hours and all of that has changed. So what we're saying is keep that in mind. And as leaders, making sure you're putting a pulse check and engaging that with your employees, having a conversation to make sure that they're doing okay. And do they need to adjust their schedule, or do you need to maybe suggest some time off, or, we have all these great benefits at Boise State, take advantage of them, even if we're remote. We have EAPs in place. So all of this is a culmination of, again, seeing more of the iceberg, that water's, more of that is being exposed, water levels going down. And so how can we be great leaders and caring for our employees and not just their outcome, right? Back to what science. So I hope that makes sense. Back to you, Kyle.
Absolutely. We're going to go ahead and move on due to timing. And we didn't have any pre-submitted questions this session, but we would like to leave some time for you all to unmic or submit in the chat some questions that you may have regarding our presentation or evaluations, and leave the floor for you all in attendance.
Abel, Kyle, I have a question. I get this question fairly often, and this is kind of a wide open one, but how much time on this, the form and everything like that, how much time should we spend on this process?
Deputy Trader, do you want to chime in on that? I mean, I think it's going to vary between different, managers, depending on how many people you manage. We've offered help for those that are managing 10 plus staff members, that we can help pre-fill some of those forms out for you. But as far as that goes, Tiffany, do you have any insight on how long it may take you when you submit evaluations?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're calculating all the time, I mean, you're going to meet with the employee, so that might be 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the conversation. As far as being prepared for that meeting, you're going to take the time and effort to everything that you have for the year on the employee and put it into the summary comments and the supervisor's comments, sorry. And then, so it just varies on how much you have prepped beforehand, but as far as what I guess my take on it, it could take anywhere between 30 minutes if you've done all the work all year to put it all into a form, to maybe 3 or 4 hours if you haven't done the work all year to create an evaluation form. So it just varies. Does that answer your question, Dalton? Am I missing it altogether?
No, I think that helps. Just wanted to hear what you think. And it's also nice to know if there is an area that has many employees, that there's a way for them to go to HR for help. That's nice.
Yeah. You brought up a great point, and thanks to our amazing Sean Miller, that was something we thought about when we put together these trainings. We have a master list. We pulled reports, and throughout the entire campus, we have already reached out to those that we feel have a high load of employees that they manage. And then we've reached out to offer services and help for those people, because we understand that's a lot of work and a lot of time.
Carl just sent in a chat as well, and this is a really good one too, Carl, for everyone, is holding employees harmless if goals needed to change over 2020, which makes complete sense based on when we set the goals, we didn't know this was going to happen. And then for setting future goals, you're going to do the best that you can, knowing that you may need to adjust them. So based on your situation and your circumstances right now, go ahead and set that SMART goal. And then if you need to adjust as you meet with your employee, feel free to update those goals and adjust.
Yeah, and again, I think it gets back to thank you, Mark. Thank you for joining today. I know he's got to hop off. I think those goals are important. Again, and again, we talked about that, but in a lot of life goals, sometimes you have to adjust to circumstances, and you keep pushing through. You may have to adjust to things that are out of your control. So very, very true. Thank you, Tiffany.
I have a question. Specifically, what techniques are you suggesting for removing those iceberg items that you mentioned from a performance review? So like, what tools should we use to say, okay, I have to separate this experience from a person's performance? Because it can get complicated when someone always has internet issues or always has some sort of issue, right? That you're like, oh man, it's pretty hard for you to do your job successfully at this point or today, right? For example.
Yeah.
I think, for me, it's, sorry, Ava, I'll chime in for a second. You're right. If someone's having internet issues in January and they've had it for the last 9 months, and we've had those ongoing discussions starting maybe in April or May, and it's still going on, well, that's not a harmless attribute. That's something that could be held to their performance. We've given them a chance to correct the behavior by understanding that, hey, we know you're going on through the situation. Maybe you need to look at using a hotspot or using a different carrier. At Ada County, we had slow internet with our WebEx, but I needed to get better uploading speed, and I've never heard of that through CenturyLink. So it's things like that we are saying harmless in some ways or another, but at the end of the day, if you've had months to correct the behavior, just like a performance issue, that's something that needs to be looked at again, because that's not necessarily harmless at that point, if that makes any sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does for that specific instance. But I can't think of any other instance necessarily at this time. But like, I can definitely think of like people who you can't get a hold of, for example. Right. And you think they're working, you can't get a hold of them, and that's kind of like a consistent thing as well. Whereas at the office, it'd be easy to like get up and walk into their office or whatever and have a conversation.
And maybe for you is letting them know that, hey, sometimes I need to call you. And I mean, if you can't answer the call, can you give me a call right away? Or again, not to use any excuses, but I have Google Hangouts on my phone in case, I am picking up my child from school and Tiffany needs to ping me. So if I'm out on my computer, I could get a ping on my phone. She could call my cell phone, or she could send me an email. I think because this situation's been, very unique, we've all used ways, we've all done things that are a little bit different to ensure that we're getting the work and the productivity done. And that's, finding solutions to ensure that, we are readily available at any given time. So again, if it's something that's been going on for, a few months now, then I think we've had enough time for them to understand, hey, I tried to reach you for the last, couple of weeks. You've only answered one time. Is there anything we could do for you? And it gets back to that. Because you're right. Yeah. I mean, as a manager or a leader, you don't want to go through that. And, at that point, we're taking a second look at, truly what's going on, especially if it's been in a conversation before.
Yeah.
Sorry, Abel. I think what's unique about this is that when we came home, we didn't necessarily know the timeline either, right? Yeah. We didn't know we were going to be home for a year or whatever. So I also think that adds some complexity, because in some cases you're like, okay, it's not their fault, I'm not going to address it. And then it kind of gets away from you too, right? Like, oh man, now we've been home 9 months. So
yeah, anyway, for sure. No, and it is, and to be honest, these are untreaded waters, right? We're not the only organization in the world that's probably dealing with the same questions and issues. I think the best approach again is using your judgment as a leader, knowing your employees better than somebody here in HR would come in and judge that situation. But also, again, getting back to, I'm sure what Tiffany will say is setting those new expectations and bringing that up and having that discussion and having those pulse checks, those check-ins regularly, so that, if it continues, even moving forward, that they know, right? Same with that video. If that employee is eating that brownie, they may not think anything's wrong with the situation. They may not think that you're trying to get a hold of them, or it's that important, or they're doing something wrong. Not that I think they probably do, but let's just say they don't. But we need to bring it up and address it and saying, hey, this is the expectation of you. This is what I need from you moving forward. So again, having those check-ins to make sure that they're understanding those expectations and adjusting if needs be, but setting that expectation as a leader so that they know what's expected of them. Tiffany, did you have any other thoughts on the situation?
No, you guys both nailed it. Come with it at a point of empathy. So finding out the why behind it and understanding and removing barriers, and then setting that expectation would be perfect. So any other questions?
I have a quick one.
Yeah.
We've talked for the last couple of years about the problems with the 0, 1, 2, 3 rating system. Where is that at? Because there's been talk about this is going to change, and it hasn't yet, and I understand that, but kind of where are we at?
Yeah, so we definitely know here in HR that is on our to-do list. It's definitely always been a sore spot, I think, for many of us, especially those that have been here for a long time. There's some barriers to that we are trying to overcome. Part of that is legislation. The form that we use is mandated by the state of Idaho, and so that in itself, if you've ever dealt with them, is its own project. It's just its own ask. But that doesn't mean that, again, I think what we're saying and what we're suggesting is having these monthly check-ins, or whatever, that smaller bite size throughout the year check-ins for you and your employees, is going to make the last big mandated DHR easier, because you're managing that throughout the year. And then, we have to complete a form and submit it to HR to submit to DHR. But the performance management is not in its form itself, right? It's not in the 0, 1, 2, 3. It's in the process of getting there. It's throughout the whole year. And so for that, what's in our control is that. The form itself is its own hurdle. But just to answer your question, that is something we're still tackling, and we run into some barriers, but that's still on our wish list. So we're definitely going after that. Did that answer your question? I feel like
I kind of figured that was the answer. I just wanted to see if there was anything else. And then the other question I had was, some of our employees, they didn't have objectives set because of kind of timing and transition. How do you guys want to see that? I mean, how do you want that handled in order to have a good record on your end?
Yeah, Tiffany, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you can make a note in the development section that no objectives are set for 2020, and then you can note what your new objectives are for 2021.
I think as long as they have the final number, that's all we really care about in HR, is making sure that final number at the end of the evaluation is there for DHR purposes.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Great question, Allison. Yeah, awesome. Love it. Well, I know that many of us are going to jump off the call and get to the HR fireside chat. So I'll let all of you go. We want to thank you for your time. And thank you for the leadership and the things you're doing within your own sphere. We really appreciate it. We'll send out the recap soon, and we hope to see you all soon.
Take care, all. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.